Hey everybody, it's Mark Quann, and we're talking with we're talking about the perfect portfolio, which our number one goal is to help people retire early. Who wants to retire at 65 to 70? Let's help people retire at 35, 40, 45, and that sort of thing. And for those who don't know, I learned to trade my first options about 20 years ago, right? And I was learning what's a put, what's a call, what do they do, and all that stuff. And but I was raising my financial IQ, and I wanted to become what's called a sophisticated investor, right? And that was my goal 20 years ago. And today I'm definitely there, but I'm always looking for opportunities to raise my financial IQ. And yeah, as you know, my favorite topic is automating income streams for people. And today I'm super excited because we are here to talk to the man, the myth, the legend, right? And is Jay Pestrichelli. Hope I didn't butcher your name. I got his book here.
You got
And
it right, Mark. You got it
yeah,
right.
and he is the options guru, man. I've got so much to learn from him. But we just want to have a lot of fun today. And just maybe Jay, or just tell us about your background, Jay. Just a little bit about where you come from and all that stuff.
Yeah, sure. So I'm the CEO and founder of Zega Financial. We've been a registered investment advisor since 2010. We specialize in options-based strategies. Prior to that, I worked at TD Ameritrade and other self-directed brokers, and I ran the active trader business there for a decade. So got lots of experience with building the tools for the self-directed investor, the do-it-yourselfer. And today with Zega Financial, we manage, like I said, option portfolios. I wrote that book that you just showed. Thank you very much for showing the Buy and Hedge book.
Yeah.
Fellow author. Thank you, Mark. And today we run, different portfolios. I think we're going to focus on some of the ETFs we manage today, particularly the Yieldmax ETFs. Is that correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm as you know, I'd love to hear about everything you guys are doing. But yeah, we'll focus on the Yield Max stuff today. But yeah, so I'm just curious, did you grow up with a financial education? Did you grow up around options or something like that? Because I grew up mixing concrete, so there was no options talk. When did you trade your
I'm a
first
restaurant
option?
guy. I'm
You're a
a
restaurant guy.
former career in the restaurant business, but I like math, right? I'm an engineer by
Yeah.
trade.
Okay.
And, when you throw more math at me, I seem to like that. That's why options felt so easy for me. And I know a lot of people, that engineers and more sophisticated investors who enjoy that part of math, like really can get into options. And it really has a lot to do with the math background. And that's what really drove me towards options, because literally it gives you so many choices on how to invest, right? When you're trading stocks, you could really only do things. You could buy it, and then you could either sell it or hold it. Like that's it. With options, you have so many different other choices on how to
Yep.
manage your risk, manage your upside, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I remember when I first learned what a covered call was, and I was like, "What? You can own the stock and build income?" And that was 20 years ago and stuff. And the funny part was, it was like 20 years ago. If you wanted to become an options trader, it was difficult. You had to figure out where to trade them. There was tons of costs involved. There was like, I remember having 3 screens up so you could analyze the trade and look at what was going on. It was just impossible to learn options 20 years ago. And what's most exciting about what you guys do is you package it up and put it to an ETF. You can buy different ETFs and you can build a little, almost like a hedge fund for a lot about it, your own personal. And that's what I'm most excited about, is the opportunities for other people to kind of have advanced strategies, and they don't have to learn to go through what we did learning how to trade options. So
Yeah, no, like that is the beauty of the ETF wrapper, because it kind of helps bring sophisticated option strategy to the masses. And look,
yep.
options are much more popular now than they were 20, 25 years ago. When you think about the evolution of options and how much has changed, being able to kind of get professional management in an ETF package, as long as you understand the dynamics of what that manager is doing in the fund, now you don't have to worry about the execution. You could be more in philosophically, this is the kind of exposure I want to create. And it is a great thing about being able to deliver, ETFs with this kind of a wrapper, based on options, for sure.
Yeah, I think the innovation is amazing with you guys. And personally, I have one rule: if it doesn't innovate and disrupt, I'm not interested. Like, it's got to be innovative and disruptive. And what you guys do, I definitely consider it super innovative, but it's a little bit disruptive in my opinion. So that's why I was really excited to talk to you guys. But so Yieldmax, obviously innovating. Um, So, anyway, so let me tell you how I came across you. But so let me tell you a quick story. So in coronavirus, I had this company, and we had booked all these seminars, and we had all these seminars, in-person seminars booked for my company, and we were doing financial education seminars, and then coronavirus canceled them all, right? So I'm like, oh, what do I do now? So wrote my next book, and I sat down, and the market was crashing, and I said, wait a second, I know how to trade options. I know how to buy leveraged ETFs, all these cool things. And it was fun. I put $7,500 into an options contract in Tesla, and it was worth $75,000 like 3 weeks later. I'm like, wow, this is so much fun. But anyway, so I decided to start a school called The Perfect Portfolio, and here we are, over 2 years later, and we're just constantly teaching people to automate your income, and running this school. So our objective is pretty similar today. Is we teach people to raise their financial IQ, teach you to fish, and automate your income. So I think that's really what we want to do today, is just kind of teach people to fish, raise their financial IQ, and talk about income automation. Now, TSLY, definitely income automation. 50 to 70% yield. I heard that and I'm like, what? Put the brakes on. And so first of all, how did you guys decide to start with Tesla? And maybe tell us the story of how TSLY came about.
Yeah, exactly. So we're talking about the Yieldmax option income TSLY ETF. So
Yes.
essentially, it is a covered call strategy. We use options, and we can get more into the nitty gritty on how we create it. But essentially, we are selling calls over long exposure of Tesla. And you mentioned some pretty lofty yields, and it's almost, you're right. You're almost like, how could anything yield anything with those numbers? And the answer is we're harvesting volatility right out of the option chain. So a lot of people understand there's cost of options, based on how volatile the underlying ticker is, the more expensive those options get. But it doesn't mean you have to be a buyer of those options. You can be a seller of those options and earn that higher premium. And so that's what we do in the strategy. We run this synthetic cover call strategy where we're selling weekly options on Tesla, the ticker TSLY, and then we're capturing the premium from those calls. And this all came about really because there's been such a thirst for yield in ETFs over the last few years. And we have some partners at the great firm Tidal Financial Group, who's kind of the other, but provider, the trust of the ETF. And we just we actually started talking about Berk, right? We were like, hey, Berkshire Hathaway doesn't pay dividend. Could we run a covered call strategy on Berk? And the answer is, oh yeah, we can. We could make like a 5% yield. And then we started thinking, well, what about Tesla? What about ARK? What about NVDY? What about, and then we just started going through all the different tickers that had kind of an elevated level of volatility where we could create these disproportionate yields as a distribution when we're selling calls. That's kind of the background of how it happens.
Yeah, very cool. So I know that I heard about your stuff, and I put some money into TSLY, and then NVDY. And then I was like, got my dividend. It was 5% last month, and then on TSLY it was 3% last month on NVIDIA. So doubled down. So thank you for all that free, that automating my income right there. That was awesome. So I know you guys recently reached Google, you reached Amazon, synthetic cover calls, Apple, Facebook. I mean, what are some other cool things in the pipeline after releasing these ones?
Yeah, so we filed. So the process for an ETF is you file what you want to launch, right? The SEC goes through a review period, and after 75 days, then you become effective. So in our initial filing, which is everything there has been kind of past the holding period, we meant the names you just mentioned, but also tickers like Coinbase and Block, which the ticker is SQ. Those are still out there for us. We filed for some ETFs as well. As I mentioned, ARK, ARKK is one of them. But after we saw the initial success with Tesla and ARK, we had a second filing. So we filed for, I think, another 9 names. So you can see, I think on May 31st, we filed for Microsoft, MicroStrategy, Airbnb, Exxon, Disney, JP Morgan. So, AMD. So there's a chunk of that are still kind of going through that holding period. And I would expect for you to see more and more of these as we continue to progress. That is kind of the beauty of this approach is, when you do typical thematic investing, it's like, oh, I want to do what's a popular one? Jets, right? I want an ETF that exposes me to the airlines. How many ETFs can you have exposure to the airlines? Like 2 or 3 of them. Otherwise, they're going to be the same thing. With the yield max approach, as long as we could find, tickers with a decent amount of volatility in them, we should be able to run an ETF that is designed to just sell calls for a premium and have a dividend. Now, they all won't be like Tesla because it's related to the volatility. I'll give you an example. Apple is live today. APLY is the ticker for us, Yieldmax. It's Aptly. That one is probably more in the 15-20% range when it comes to yield, right? It all depends, but that's kind of what the range that one's going at. So it'll depend on the volatility of the stock. But yeah, lots of other tickers on the way for us.
Very cool, very cool. So synthetic covered calls. Correct me if I'd never heard of these before. So let me try and describe this. It's you don't own the stock. You basically put the money into government bonds, 85% into government bonds and maybe some cash, and then you buy the call option for the upside, and then you sell options. Is it shorter duration options for the income, or how's the construction of that thing go roughly?
Yeah, that's okay. The synthetic or a combo, those are synonymous, is essentially, like you said, a long call and a short put. And that makes it feel like you're long the stock. So if you ever read an option book or you look on Investopedia, you'll see that a synthetic option is just long stock, short put. That makes it feel like you're long the call, long the shares. But as you just mentioned, with significantly lower amounts of cash being laid out to do so. So you can be more efficient with your money and invest it in, these days, bonds. I think we have 1 and 2 year duration bonds. So those are kicking out, 5 to 4.5, 4.75% on top of then owning kind of this combo, which makes it feel like you're long the stock. And so as the stock moves up and down, so does our ETF. There is definitely a high correlation to the underlying ticker. And so when we go to then sell the calls, because the whole synthetic covered call is you've got that combo, long call, short put, and then we sell very short-term calls to generate the maximum amount of time decay that we can.
So is it like a 1 month call and then you're selling two 1 and 2 week options to get those super high yields? Is that kind of roughly?
So usually we'll keep the combo, the long call and short put. We'll keep those two somewhere between 1 to 3 months out. And then we're selling sometimes weekly calls. There are some days where we'll sell only 1 or 2 days out. Like we said, the evolution of options is brought us to weekly options on a lot of these tickers. And so there's times we're only selling a call 2 or 3 days out, but our combo might be months out.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And we spent a lot of time in this course where we would buy, we'd get a monthly income or whatever. But, I understand if you buy those shorter durations, you're really pump up the yield. So I totally understand what you guys are doing over there. And once I understood it, I was like, I'm sold. I'm all in. Okay. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of a synthetic covered call versus a covered call? Are there any big disadvantages or advantages?
Yes. So from a general performance perspective, they are very similar, right? You have your upside is up to the strike of your short call. So you have a limited amount of upside, but you get paid for that limitation. The downside on our synthetic cover call and its regular cover call is the same. You have all the downside of the stock. So that's something that I think is important to remember, because a lot of people hear, whoa, 50% yield. What's my risk? I'll just, make 50% every year. And the answer is you take the underlying risk of a volatile stock like Tesla, right?
Yeah.
The first week we were live with the Tesla ETF, Tesla was trading about 180. Like 3 weeks later, it's trading at 100, right? So our ETF dropped because we have downside exposure. Like cover calls are not protective. They are essentially just meant to generate income. So they feel very similar. Now, the advantage on a synthetic, we talked about already, you could be more efficient with your cash and invest it in treasuries. Okay, that's great. So now you kind of give yourself a little extra kicker on the yield. The other thing about it is it allows for position management to be a little more dynamic. What do I mean by that? When you have regular stock and a covered call and the stock goes through your strike, your call is now costing you money because it's losing money, even though you made from where you entered up to the strike. Usually what people have to do in order to cover that call, you got to sell some shares, right? So
Right.
sell a few shares and then you have less stock to sell calls next time. That's not the
Okay.
case with the synthetic options, right? We could just roll that whole combo out, create extra cash for us, and then that ends up covering the cost of the call. And I never, have to take off my contracts. And so it's one of those things that there are some tactical advantages when it comes to that. The downside is we're generating a lot of taxable events, right? Because we're trading every 3 months on the underlying. Whereas if you just own Tesla for 5 years, you never have to sell it. With our options, we are going to create taxable events, not only on the short calls that we're selling every week, but on the synthetic call when we roll that.
Okay, cool. So I love the 50% dividend, but I don't like the taxes. I think that's sort of the trade-off. We got massive yield and income, but okay, we got some taxes. So that's really the disadvantage. There is some taxes. Okay, that's kind of what I figured it. But other positions will pay 12% and it's kind of taxable. I'd rather take the 70% and make it taxable. Thanks.
Sure.
I'm good.
Sure.
I'm good. And then when you talk about drip for those guys to know is just kind of reinvest those dividends. So I guess on a topic of market appreciation, we have some market appreciation here plus that 50% dividend. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's kind of what's happening right now. We're participating in some of the upside of the underlying ticker, right? Because we don't sell at the money calls, we sell out of the money calls. So we give ourselves, somewhere between 5 to 10% each month in case the underlying stock goes up. So we have that opportunity in addition to the yield. Yes.
Okay, good. So what happens, let's say, if Tesla goes up 50% in a year, what does TSLY do over that same period approximately? Can you approximate? I mean, I know it's hard to say. There's a lot of factors.
Yeah, it all depends how it gets there.
Yeah.
I listen, look, just based on our history so far, and that has kind of happened this year, right? We're going to capture. Listen, again, it all depends on how it happens, but we're going to capture a material amount of that upside. Maybe we get half, right? In that scenario, maybe we get 3/4 of it. If we get lucky on the way that it goes up and only goes up 5% a week for 10 weeks in a row, we're going to get all of it. If it goes up 40% in one day, like NVDY did after its earnings, we're only going to get 7 or 8 of it, right? So again, it all depends how it happens, but we will capture some of the upside regardless, because we're always selling out of the money calls.
Yeah. So this is a good thing. So let's say I'm getting a 50% dividend, I'm reinvesting that 50%. That's some pretty amazing growth of essentially market appreciation through essentially drip and reinvesting. I mean, that's kind of the idea. Is that how some investors are using it, or how are you typically seeing TSLY being used?
Yeah, all of the yield maxes for sure. We're seeing, dividends being reinvested. It's the way to continue to get the maximum amount of growth out of the ETFs. So what maybe some folks know, maybe some folks forget, when you distribute cash for your yield, the stock goes down by that amount, right? So if you're $20 ETF and you distribute $1, the next morning when you wake up, you'll have $1 of cash and a $19 ETF, right? You can't make money out of nowhere. So what happens is the ETF price can go down when you have large distributions, but reinvesting back in now increases your share count, brings you back up to the same, in that example, if you had 100 shares, brings you back to that $2,000 value of the ETF. But now you have more shares, right? So the next time we distribute $1 a share, if we distribute $1 a share, now you've got, instead of getting $100, you get $105 because you got to buy more shares. And so that the dividend reinvestment or DRIP is what we think really important when it comes to longer term investing with these kinds of ETFs that have these very high yields.
Yeah, for sure. Well, good. As you know, we're a little bit different in this course in that we teach a buy, borrow, die strategy, which for our viewers who follow us, they realize that they know that we teach to invest and never sell the investments and always reinvest that dividend, and then basically do what these super rich people do is they borrow, which is tax free, and essentially keep compounding that portfolio. I think we're just so excited because if you run an investment calculator on 50% dividend and your 50% dividend is growing by 50% per year, that means a lot of our students get to retire at a young age, right? So that's we're kind of I mean we're more than excited for what you guys are doing over there. I mean, it's just it's so innovative, and it's so in line with what we do and our purpose as a company. So we're simply having just having a blast with this thing. So
Thanks. Yeah, look, like all things, anything that's got that kind of a high yield, just
yep.
be prepared that there's some volatility associated with it, right? Risk and reward are always
Yep.
linked naturally. But you're right? When you can compound your ownership, your shares, I think at 50%, you're doubling every 16 months, right? So just
Yep.
think through that math. And if you have a nice little upswing on the underlying stock, that helps. So like with any covered call, right? You don't want to be bearish the stock that you have a covered call position on. Same thing with us. If you don't believe in Apple, or you don't believe in NVIDIA, or you don't believe in Tesla, then you should pick a different ticker, right? That's why we're going to put out more. But if you think, the stocks will be sideways to up, then running a covered call strategy can definitely be pretty profitable over time for you.
Yeah, so an investor that says, I love Tesla, I love NVIDIA, but I want some dividend yield, they could own both, right? They could own some Tesla and own some TSLY, bump up the borrow. But we just love those dividends, because if we're borrowing at 7 and we're getting a 50% dividend, the math is pretty good. We really like that math. So
sure.
So
yeah.
so I know, yeah. So let me ask you this: what other innovative things are you guys planning in the future? We know you can only disclose so much. Anything in the pipeline that we can be excited about with you guys?
Yeah, the first thing I'll pick up where I left off before, that we filed for more tickers. I think there's probably a suite of products that are maybe a version of our existing ETFs, right? We've been asked multiple times for, hey, could you just do a wrapper where it is the max of Yieldmax, right? Give us the top 10 yielding ETFs, put them in a wrapper for us. Or there are actually options on our options-based ETFs, right? So can you sell calls over TSLY, right? Things like that you could start to look at. And even if we don't have an underlying ETF, you could maybe go down the path of, like the volatility of the day, right? And we say, okay, look, earnings are coming up this week I think we have earnings coming up just right now about Amazon and Apple, but there could be other things like, could be somebody else's earnings week. Hey, run a Yieldmax for that just for 2 weeks. Don't form a whole ETF, but do a synthetic, sell the calls, and move on to another, volatile ticker of the month. And so there's things like that we could now get a little, take it to kind of the second degree once we've got this first one under our belt working well, which today is August 1st. Yesterday we passed 500 million in assets in the Yieldmax suite. So it seems to be well received by investors, which means we'll probably do more and more of it.
Cool. Well, we got I think about between 50 and 100 students joining our class tomorrow, and they're all going to be hearing about Yieldmax tomorrow. So, but anyways,
good.
Yeah, we're excited to work with you, and I'm looking forward to anything you guys come up with. And I would encourage guys, we'll put Yieldmax's website in the YouTube. You can just press on there and just throw your email there, and you'll kind of get updates on when anything is released with Yieldmax. And I'm just excited to work with you, and hopefully one day when we have some super innovative thing, we can have you back and talk more about options and automating your income. So
anytime, Mark. This is great. Thanks so much for having me.
Hey, thanks again for your time, Jay. All right.